Welcome to our Scary Stories, the podcast that explores the darkest corners of the human mind. I'm your host, and tonight's episode is not for the faint of heart. We will be delving into the mysterious world of alien abductions, and our story tonight will leave you questioning the very nature of our existence. Jill's alien abduction story is a chilling account of one woman's encounter with extraterrestrial life. Her experience is so terrifying that she cannot even sleep without reliving the trauma. So, buckle up and get ready for a journey that will have you looking over your shoulder for weeks to come. This is Jill's story. Jill tossed and turned in her bed, the relentless insomnia gnawing at her sanity. Her apartment was quiet, the only sounds the ticking of the clock and the hum of the refrigerator, each passing minute mocking her inability to sleep. The darkness that enveloped her room felt suffocating, and the weight of her exhaustion pressed down on her like a lead blanket. In her mind, Jill's thoughts raced, fueled by her sleepless frustration. Why can't I just fall asleep like a normal person? She wondered, her mental voice tinged with desperation. Is there something wrong with me? These questions haunted her, echoing through the caverns of her tired mind, leaving her feeling even more isolated in her own home. As the night wore on, Jill's thoughts spiraled into darker territory, the insomnia-induced anxiety taking hold. What if I lose my job because I can't function during the day? She worried, her heart racing at the prospect. How long can I keep going like this before my health starts to suffer? Despite her mounting fear and frustration, Jill tried to find a glimmer of hope in the seemingly endless abyss of sleeplessness. Maybe there's still a solution out there that I haven't tried yet, she mused, her mind grasping at straws. I just need to find the right help, and then maybe I can finally sleep again. But with each passing night, Jill's hope began to wane, her thoughts consumed by the crushing burden of her insomnia. The quiet apartment, once her sanctuary, had become a prison of her own making, her mind a restless, relentless tormentor. And as she lay there, tangled in her bedsheets and drowning in her thoughts, Jill wondered if she would ever escape the suffocating grip of her sleepless existence. Desperate for relief, Jill had sought help from numerous doctors and sleep specialists, but none had been able to offer her a solution. Her life was slipping away, the days a blur of fatigue and the nights an unending torment. One day, while browsing the internet in search of a remedy, Jill stumbled upon an advertisement for a hypnotist who claimed to be able to cure insomnia. Skeptical but desperate, she decided to give it a try. A hypnotist's office was located in a dimly lit, musty-smelling building that sent a shiver down Jill's spine. As she entered, a sense of unease washed over her, making her question if she had made the right decision. The walls were adorned with old, faded posters of the subconscious mind, and the dull glow of a single lamp cast eerie shadows across the room. The hypnotist, Dr. Samuel Grayson, was an older man with intense eyes that seemed to pierce through Jill's very soul. He had a neatly trimmed silver beard and a soothing voice that contrasted with his somewhat disconcerting appearance. Jill couldn't help but feel a mixture of curiosity and apprehension as she studied the man who was supposed to help her unlock the secrets of her insomnia. As Dr. Grayson led her to a comfortable, high-backed leather chair, Jill couldn't shake the feeling that she was stepping into the unknown. The office was filled with an assortment of peculiar trinkets and artifacts, each one seemingly telling a story of its own. She tried to focus on her surroundings to distract herself from the growing knot of anxiety in her stomach. Dr. Grayson began explaining the process of hypnosis, his voice calm and reassuring, as he described how he would guide her into a deep state of relaxation. Jill listened carefully, trying to push past her reservations and trust in the man before her. She couldn't help but wonder, however, if this unconventional approach would be the answer to her sleepless nights. As the time came to proceed with the hypnosis, Jill hesitated, her mind racing with doubts and fears. She glanced around the room once more, taking in the strange collection of objects and the unsettling atmosphere they created. Yet, despite her trepidation, she found herself reluctantly agreeing to the process, her desperation for a solution outweighing her fears. With a deep breath, Jill closed her eyes and allowed herself to be led into the unknown, her fate now in the hands of the enigmatic Dr. Grayson. Under hypnosis, Jill's mind began to unravel a terrifying memory that she had long kept buried. As Dr. Grayson's voice guided her deeper into her subconscious, she felt herself slipping away into a hidden corner of her own mind, where darkness and fear had taken hold. She found herself back in her bedroom, paralyzed by an eerie green light that seeped in through the curtains. The once familiar sanctuary had transformed into a place of dread and uncertainty. Her heart raced as her breath hitched in her throat, her eyes wide with terror as she tried to make sense of her surroundings. The air around her became electric, the hairs on her arms standing on end as an inexplicable energy pulsed through the room. The atmosphere was heavy with tension, as if the very air itself was pressing down upon her, suffocating her in its oppressive embrace. The room was filled with an otherworldly hum, a low, vibrating sound that seemed to resonate through her very bones. It felt as though the sound was not only external but also emanating from deep within her, sending tremors of fear down her spine. As the hum intensified, Jill began to hear whispers that seemed to come from everywhere, and nowhere at the same time. The hushed, unintelligible voices were like ghostly echoes, reverberating around her and adding to the overwhelming sense of dread that consumed her. With each passing second, Jill's fear grew, her mind struggling to process the strange and horrifying events unfolding before her. She felt a wave of icy panic wash over her, chilling her to her core as she realized that she was utterly powerless, trapped in the clutches of something beyond her comprehension. As the terrifying scene continued to play out in her mind, Jill's breathing grew ragged, her heart hammering in her chest. Despite being under hypnosis, the fear she felt was as real and raw as the night it had first occurred, the memory vivid and visceral, threatening to consume her whole. Jill's heart pounded in her chest like a frenzied drumbeat, threatening to burst through her ribcage as she recalled being lifted from her bed. Her body, once a sanctuary of her own control, now felt numb and unresponsive, as if every muscle and nerve had been severed from her will. Panic surged through her veins, igniting her mind with a chaotic whirlwind of fear and confusion. She was enveloped by a blinding light, so intense that it seemed to pierce her very soul. The brilliance of the light was both awe-inspiring and terrifying, a merciless force that held her captive in its relentless grip. Jill's mind raced, desperately seeking an explanation, a shred of logic amidst the chaos. But reason eluded her, drowned out by the overwhelming fear that consumed her entire being. A sensation of weightlessness overtook her, as though gravity had been ripped away, leaving her adrift in an abyss of terror. Her stomach churned with a nauseating mix of fear and disorientation as she felt her body rise, her limbs flailing helplessly in the void. Every instinct screamed for her to resist, to fight back against the unseen force that held her captive. But her body remained unyielding, a prisoner to the mysterious power that controlled her. Inside her own mind, Jill was a whirlwind of frantic thoughts and suffocating fear. She tried to scream, but no sound escaped her lips, the silence amplifying her terror. She felt utterly alone and powerless, her mind grasping at straws, searching for a way to break free from the nightmare that held her in its grip. As Jill continued to recount the harrowing experience, her terror grew, filling every corner of her consciousness. The memory, once buried deep within her mind, now surfaced with a vengeance, the vivid details and haunting sensations clawing at her sanity, threatening to drag her down into the depths of her own fear. When her vision cleared, Jill found herself in a cold, sterile spacecraft, a stark contrast to the familiar warmth of her bedroom. The walls, made of an eerily smooth material, were lined with advanced technology and glowing screens that cast an unsettling, flickering light across the room. A hum of machinery filled the air, punctuated by the occasional beep or low, unintelligible murmur emanating from the screens. The air was heavy with an unidentifiable, metallic odor that seemed to coat the back of her throat, making her feel as if she were breathing in the cold sterility of the alien environment. The temperature inside the spacecraft was colder than any earthly chill, sending shivers down her spine and causing goosebumps to rise on her exposed skin. Her heart hammered in her chest as she realized she was not alone. Other abductees, eyes wide with terror, were suspended in the air alongside her. Their faces were contorted with fear and disbelief, each one as vulnerable and helpless as the next. The sight of their shared terror amplified Jill's own panic, the knowledge that she was not the only victim only adding to the horror of the situation. As she hung there, suspended in the cold and unfamiliar spacecraft, Jill's senses were bombarded by an onslaught of terrifying stimuli. The strange, otherworldly sounds of the ship's technology assaulted her ears, while the cold air seemed to seep into her very bones. The unsettling glow of the screens cast eerie shadows that danced and flickered, creating a nightmarish landscape that filled her with a sense of impending doom. Each passing moment was a symphony of terror, every sight, sound, and sensation a haunting reminder of the unimaginable reality she now found herself in. The surreal, nightmarish world of the spacecraft seemed to close in around her, the weight of her fear and despair pressing down on her like a crushing force, threatening to suffocate her with its relentless intensity. The alien beings responsible for her abduction were horrifying creatures, unlike anything Jill had ever seen before. They had elongated limbs, unnervingly flexible and agile, which allowed them to glide across the room with a fluid, almost serpentine grace. Their grayish skin was slick and seemed to shimmer in the dim light, giving off a faint, unearthly glow. Their heads were disproportionately large compared to their slender bodies, and their faces were dominated by black, unblinking eyes that seemed to peer straight into her soul. There were at least half a dozen of these terrifying creatures in the room, each one silently observing her with a cold, calculating gaze. As they moved closer, Jill could hear the faint rustle of their skin against the cold floor, and the gentle creaking of their joints as they adjusted their positions. The air around them seemed to crackle with a strange energy, as if the very atmosphere were responding to their presence. As the aliens approached, their advanced tools whirring and humming in their hands, Jill's heart raced in her chest. Her breath came in shallow gasps, her body trembling with fear and anticipation. She felt as if she were being swallowed by a sea of darkness, the chilling blackness of the alien's eyes consuming her with every passing moment. The room was filled with a chorus of strange, otherworldly sounds, the gentle hum of the spacecraft's machinery, the soft rustle of the aliens' movements, and the ominous whir of their tools. Each sound seemed to echo in her mind, merging with her own panicked thoughts to create a symphony of terror-filled sounds that threatened to overwhelm her. As the alien beings drew nearer, Jill could feel the cold, alien presence of their minds pressing against her own, an unsettling force that chilled her to the core. Jill's memory of being taken by the aliens to be operated on was a horrifying blend of fear, pain, and helplessness. As they led her into a sterile, harshly lit room, she felt her knees buckle with terror. Her heart raced, and a cold sweat broke out across her body as she was overwhelmed by the knowledge that she was completely at their mercy. The room was filled with ominous, alien devices that glinted menacingly in the blinding light. Their strange, gleaming surfaces promised untold agony, and her breath hitched in her throat as she tried to comprehend the horrors that awaited her. The air was thick with a sterile, clinical scent that clung to her nostrils, making her feel as if she were suffocating. As the aliens strapped her down onto a cold, metallic table, she could feel her body trembling with fear, her skin crawling as their cold, clammy hands touched her. She was powerless to resist as they began their invasive procedures, cold, sharp instruments probing her skin with a sickening precision. Each touch felt like a violation, an intimate intrusion that stripped her of her dignity and humanity. The pain was indescribable, a searing agony that seemed to tear through her very soul. Jill felt tears streaming down her cheeks, her vision blurring as she tried to block out the unbearable sensations that engulfed her. Each moment of the ordeal stretched out into an eternity, the relentless torment threatening to shatter her sanity. As Jill relived this terrifying experience, the vivid, horrifying details came rushing back, filling her with a renewed sense of dread and despair. The fear and pain she had felt during the ordeal were as real and visceral as they had been in that terrifying moment, leaving her breathless and trembling as she recounted her harrowing ordeal. But the nightmare that Jill had to endure was far from over. As her memories continued to unravel under hypnosis, she realized that this horrifying experience was just the first of many. Each subsequent abduction was more terrifying and invasive than the one before, and the terror she felt grew exponentially with each encounter. Jill saw herself taken again and again, her body subjected to unimaginable experiments at the hands of these monstrous beings. With each abduction, the memories grew more vivid, the pain more intense, and the fear more suffocating. She was trapped in a relentless cycle of terror, powerless to escape the clutches of these nightmarish creatures. As she relived these unspeakable events, Jill came to the chilling realization that her insomnia was not merely a random affliction, but a symptom of the deep-rooted trauma she had suffered at the hands of her alien captors. A horrifying truth was that her sleepless nights were her mind's desperate attempt to protect her from the nightmares that lay buried within her memories, a last-ditch effort to shield her from the unbearable pain that threatened to consume her. This realization only served to amplify her terror, as she understood that there was no escape from the horrifying past that haunted her. Her life had been irrevocably marked by these events, and the weight of the unspeakable trauma she had endured loomed over her like a dark cloud, casting a shadow over every aspect of her existence. As Jill continued to relive the terror of her experiences, she became dimly aware of a distant, soothing voice cutting through the haze of her memories. It was the hypnotist, Dr. Grayson, counting down slowly, his voice gradually growing louder and more distinct. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, Dr. Grayson said, his voice steady and reassuring. As he reached the final count, Jill felt herself being pulled from the depths of her nightmarish recollections and back into the safety of the present. Blinking away the tears that had welled up in her eyes, she found herself back in the dimly lit office, the musty smell of the room a stark contrast to the sterile environment of the spacecraft she had just revisited. Dr. Grayson, his face etched with concern, gently placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "You're not alone, Jill," he said softly, his eyes filled with warmth and empathy. "There are others who have gone through the same trauma you have. Others who have been taken and subjected to these horrifying experiences. We can help you find support, a community of people who understand and share your pain." The knowledge that there were others who had endured the same unspeakable terror brought a small measure of comfort to Jill. While the weight of her past still bore down on her, she realized that perhaps, with the help of Dr. Grayson and others like her, she might find a way to confront and heal from the nightmare that had haunted her for so long. As Jill left Dr. Grayson's office, she felt a mixture of emotions. There was a lingering sense of vulnerability from having relived her terrifying experiences under hypnosis, but also a cautious optimism that she might finally find a way to cope with the trauma she had endured. Her heart still raced from the memories, but she clung to the knowledge that she was not alone in her suffering. The next day, as Jill tried to settle back into her routine, the phone rang. It was Dr. Grayson, his familiar, soothing voice bringing her a small measure of comfort. He told her about a counseling session he was hosting at his office for survivors of alien abductions. Jill felt a knot of anxiety form in her stomach at the prospect of sharing her story with others, but she also felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this could be the beginning of her journey toward healing. She hesitated for a moment, weighing the possibilities in her mind. The thought of facing her deepest fears in front of others was terrifying, but she knew that she could not continue to live in the shadow of her past. Taking a deep breath, she agreed to attend the counseling session. As she hung up the phone, Jill felt a small but significant shift within her, a determination to confront her experiences and reclaim her life from the grip of her abductors. Jill hesitantly attended a counseling session organized by Dr. Grayson for survivors of alien abductions. The atmosphere in the room was heavy with the shared burden of trauma and the unspoken understanding of the horrors each person had faced. As she scanned the faces of the attendees, Jill felt a chill run down her spine. She recognized some of them from her memories of the spacecraft. As the session progressed, each survivor took their turn to speak, recounting the ways their lives had been forever changed by their abductions. Rebecca, a middle-aged woman with dark circles under her eyes, described the crippling anxiety that had come to define her existence. She spoke of countless sleepless nights spent fearing the return of her captors, every noise and shadow sending her heart into overdrive. As she recounted her story, Jill could see the exhaustion etched on her face. Michael, a once successful businessman, shared the tale of his life unraveling in the aftermath of his abduction. His marriage had fallen apart, his wife unable to cope with his unexplained absences, and the emotional distance that had grown between them. He had lost his high-powered job, unable to focus or maintain his previous level of performance. His voice was tinged with regret as he spoke of the life he had lost. Emily, a 16-year-old girl with a haunted look in her eyes, spoke about her paralyzing fear of the dark. Her voice trembled as she admitted that she could no longer sleep without every light in her room turned on, the shadows becoming monsters that terrorized her in the night. She had been a straight-A student, but her grades had plummeted, her concentration shattered by her constant state of terror. As each person shared their story, Jill felt a sense of camaraderie, an understanding that she had never thought possible. Despite the pain and sorrow that filled the room, she knew that she was no longer alone in her struggle. Together, they might begin to heal the wounds left by their abductions, finding solace in their shared experiences and the knowledge that they were not alone. And that brings us to the end of Jill's alien abduction story. I hope you were able to withstand the spine-chilling terror of this episode. Remember, the universe is a vast and unknown place, and we may never truly understand what lies beyond our planet. But one thing is for sure, after tonight's episode, you'll never look at the night sky the same way again. Thank you for joining us on our scary stories, and until next time, sleep tight if you can. This is our Scary Stories signing off for tonight.